In order to banish from the mind the identity of the divine and human predicates, and the consequent identity of the divine and human nature, recourse is had to the idea that God, as the absolute real being, has an infinite fullness of various predicates, of which we here know only a part, and no such are analogous to our own, while the rest, by virtue of which God must thus have quite a different nature from the human, or that which is analogous to the human, we should only know in the future, that is, after death. But an infinite plenitude and multitude of predicates which are really different, so different that one does not immediately involve the other, is realized only in an infinite plenitude or multitude of different beings or individuals. Thus the human nature presents an infinite abundance of different predicates, and for that very reason it presents an infinite abundance of different individuals. Each new man is a new predicate, a new phasis of humanity. As many as are the men, so many are the powers and the properties of humanity. It is true that there are some elements in every individual, but under such various conditions and modifications that they appear new and peculiar. The mystery of the inexhaustible fullness of the divine predicates is therefore nothing else than the mystery of human nature considered as an infinitely varied, infinitely modifiable, but consequently phenomenal being. Only in the realm of the senses, only in space and time, does there exist a being of really infinite qualities or predicates. Where there are really different predicates, there are different times. One man is a distinguishable musician, a distinguished author, a distinguished physician, but he cannot compose music, write books, and perform cures in the same moment of time. Time, and not the Hegelian dialectic, is the medium of uniting opposites, contradictories, in one and the same subject. But distinguished and detached from the nature of man, and combined with the idea of God, the infinite fullness of various predicates, is a conception without reality, a mere fantasy, a conception derived from the sensible world, but without the essential conditions, without the truth of sensible existence, a conception which stands in direct contradiction with the divine being considered as a spiritual, such as abstract, simple, single being. For the predicates of God are precisely of this character, that one involves all the others, because there is no real difference between them. If therefore in the present predicates I have not the future in the present God, nor the future of God, then the future of God is not the present, but they are two distinct beings. But this distinction is in contradiction with the unity and simplicity of the theological God. Why is a given predicate a predicate of God? Because it is divine in its nature, such as because it expresses no limitation and no defect. Why are other predicates applied to him? Because, however various in themselves, they agree in this, that they are all alike, express perfection and unlimitedness. Hence, I can conceive innumerable predicates of God, because they must all agree with the abstract idea of the Godhead, and must have in common that which constitutes every single predicate of the divine attribute. Thus it is in the system of Spinoza. He speaks of an infinite number of attributes to the divine substance, but he specifies none except thought and extension. Why? Because it is a matter of indifference to know them. Nay, because they are in themselves indifferent and superfluous, for with all these innumerable predicates, I yet always mean to say the same things when I speak of thought and extension. Why is thought an attribute of substance? Because, according to Spinoza, it is capable of being conceived by itself, because it expresses something indivisible and perfect and infinite. Then why extension or matter? For the same reason. Thus substance can have an indefinite number of predicates, because it is not their specific definition, their difference, but their identity, their equivalence, which makes them attributes of substance. Or rather, substance has innumerable predicates only because it has properly no predicates, that is, no definite real predicate. The indefinite unity which is the product of thought completes itself by the indefinite multiplicity which is the product of the imagination. Because the predicate is not multum, it is multa. In truth, the positive predicates are thought and extension. In these two, infinitely more is said than in the nameless innumerable predicates, for they express something definite, as in them I have something. But substance is too indifferent, too apathetic to be something, that is, to have the qualities and passions, that it may not be something. It is rather nothing. Now, when it is shown that what the subject is lies entirely in the attributes of the subject, that is, that the predicate is the true subject, it is also proved that if the divine predicates are attributes of the human nature, the subject of those predicates is also of the human nature. But the divine predicates are partly general and partly personal. The general predicates are the metaphysical, but these serve only as external points of support to religion. They are not the characteristic definitions of religion. It is the personal predicates alone which constitute the essence of religion, in which the divine being is the object of religion. Such are, for example, that God is a person, that he is a moral lawgiver, the father of mankind, the Holy One, the just, the good, and the merciful. It is, however, at once clear, or it will at least be clear in the sequel with regard to those and other definitions, that especially as applied to the personality, they are purely human definitions, and that consequently man in religion, in his relation to God, is in relation to his own nature. For to the religious sentiment these predicates are not mere conceptions, mere images which man forms of God, to be distinguished from which God is in himself, but truths and facts and realities. Religion knows nothing of anthropomorphisms, to wit they are not anthropomorphisms. It is the very essence of religion that to wit these definitions express the nature of God. They are pronounced to be images only by the understanding, which reflects on religion, and which while defending them, yet before its own tribunal denies them. But to the religious sentiment God is a real Father, real love, and real mercy, for to him he is a real, living, personal being, and therefore his attributes are also living and personal. Nay, the definitions which are the most sufficing to the religious sentiments are precisely those which give the most offense to the understanding, and which in the process of reflection on religion it denies. Religion is essentially emotion, hence, objectively also, emotion is to it necessarily of a divine nature. Even anger appears to it an emotion not unworthy of God, provided only there be a religious motive as the foundation of this anger. But here it is also essential to observe, and this phenomenon is an extremely remarkable one, characterizing the very core of religion, that in proportion as to the divine subject is in reality human, the greater is the apparent difference between God and man. That is, the more, by reflection on religion, by theology, is the identity of the divine and human denied, and that human considered as such is depreciated. The reason of this is that as one is positive in the conception of the divine being can only be human, the conception of man as an object of consciousness can only be negative. To enrich God, man must become poor. That God may be all, man must be nothing. But he desires to be nothing in himself, because what he takes from himself is not lost to him, since it is preserved in God. Man has his being in God. Why then should he have it in himself? Where is the necessity of positing the same thing twice, or of having it twice? What man withdraws from himself, what he renounces in himself, he only enjoys in an incomparably higher and fuller measure in God.